Hello and welcome to Bitfumes. I'm your host Sarthak and this is Flask Crash Course. So let's see what we are going to create in this course. First of all, I can tell you that all the source code is available inside this URL of GitHub, github.com/bitfumes/Flask Crash Course 2023. That's everything is there. You can check it out. Now, what we are creating this homepage. Yeah, that's good. That's not a pretty much thing. But if you see, if I go on localhost 5000/user, I can have a very nice nav bar, which we have here. And then we have this table, which will show all the users. We are using SQLite database and Sqlalchemy package for managing all our database thing. Sqlalchemy is ORM for Python. Now, you can see we have this user, we have this link, and we have this delete button. If I click on this user, we can show the ID and we can also add new user. So new user at gmail.com or just mail.com, and you can see it's added and redirected back here. And this means we are using post request, get request. Also, if we delete a user, you can see the user is instantly deleted. That means we are using delete method. And yes, we are using delete method, also adding some JavaScript flavor to make it really amazing. So all these things are there, but we are not just creating a normal basic tutorial. We are creating an application which is having a proper file structure of a bigger application we can create with the Flask. So you can see we are not just using a simple init or this app.py and having everything inside it. App.py or init.py is very clean. It's lean. That's the power of creating the enterprise or bigger application. This means all the templates are inside this template directory, and also we are using the Jinja 2 template engine with the include and template inheritance feature. Then we also have the models. So we are creating the model. We are using extensions.py to define our Sqlalchemy ORM. Then we are extracting all the routes dedicated to a file which we are using here, and everything is structured in a way you need to create for a bigger application, for a real project application. So let's now start this video with a hope that yes, we will going to make it. We will going to learn Flask in an amazing way. But I can tell you that if you have not yet subscribed to Bitfumes YouTube channel, please go and subscribe to Bitfumes YouTube channel, because the subscription rate is really low. I want to deliver some amazing content, but when I see the subscriber rate, I feel like, oh, so just keep me motivated by having more subscription. Share these videos with your friends so that more people can join and see that how amazing tutorials are here. You can share also to make your friends' life better, to make your colleagues' life better by learning something cool from Bitfumes. Let's start Flask Crash Course. So what is Flask? Flask is a versatile and lightweight web framework for Python language. And Flask is created by an Australian software programmer known as Armin Ronacher. But why Flask? Why not other frameworks of Python programming, just like Django and others we have? Because Flask follow a micro framework approach, which basically means that it's going to provide you the very essential things needed to make any web application up and running, as well as giving developers the freedom and the flexibility to use any tool and library based upon their project's need. To get started with Flask, you need to open the Google, and in the Google, just type Flask, and first you will get this framework. But if you're not getting it, you can say Flask Python, then same website. Then if you click here, you will land on the same page which I have already opened. The basic URL is flask.palettesprojects.com. Weird, but this is how it is. Anyways, so when you land on this website, the first thing you need to notice here that it's not a fancy website, because I said that Flask follow micro framework. That means everything is just as minimal as it should be to make things running and doing the task. So here is the website, which is having a very simple and easy to follow guide. So let's click on this installation section and see what's the first thing we need to do. First of all, it has some dependencies thing related to the Flask. So let's quickly look into this and then we will move forward. So first of all, we have whatever the weird name is, workzug, but it's a WSGI. Now what is WSGI? It's called Web Server Gateway Interface. Basically it says that whenever any request goes, and then it will redirect that request to the application. So this is WSGI. You may also have heard about ASGI, which is called Asynchronous Server Gateway Interface, which is for asynchronous thing. Then we have a template engine called Jinja. We have a markup safe for Jinja. That means protecting the injection attacks like that. Then comes the it's dangerous securely sign the data. That means the cookies are signed. That means they are super secure. And then we have a click, which is a command line framework for Flask, and Flask command line things are done with this, and Blinker that support for signals. Now what is signal? Signal is basically an event and notification kind of thing. So whenever something happen in your application, you can notify to every subscriber of that event, kind of that. So Blinker provides support for that. Anyways, what we need to do, we first ever need to create the virtual environment. Now why we need the virtual environment in any Python framework or Python application even? Now imagine you are an artist and you are using same canvas to have your different arts. Now every time you decide to have a new art, you're using same canvas and that is already filled with different colors and different strokes. So what's the best way? You need a new canvas for every art you are starting out. Why? Because every art need different combination of colors, different combinations of brush strokes, even different combinations of background. Similar to this, in Python, whenever we are creating any new project, we create a virtual environment, and virtual environment you can think like a new canvas for your project. Why we need a new environment? Because every project depends upon different libraries. Even two projects needs one library, but with different version, there could be clashes in between. And to avoid these conflicts between the libraries, between the packages, between the project even, we use a virtual environment. Now these virtual environments are isolated. What do you mean by isolated? That means whatever you are installing inside that environment will stay there and will not affect anything outside of that environment. So you can even have different version of Pythons in two different environments. That's the power of having virtual environment inside the Python. So let's now work and create the new virtual environment in our system. So first of all, you can follow whatever you are using. Like if you're using Windows, you can follow something like that, or you're using Mac or Linux, follow this. So whatever you have the project, just go inside it and make sure you are using Python 3, which is the latest one, and then you can say -m venv virtual environment and .virtual environment. That means this is going to be the directory. So first of all, I will create new terminal, and inside that I will go to desktop. Now in this desktop, I'm going to first create new directory called Flask. Let's cd into the Flask, and now I'm going to say first check which version of Python I have. So Python version, it's not having. So I need to say Python 3. As you know, it's also given here, you need the Python 3 to be written. Okay, so Python 3 version is there. Now what I'm going to do, instead of version written here, I will say -m. Okay, after that I say venv virtual environment and .venv. Now before running this command, I can just show you that there is nothing here inside this directory. So once again, I can copy this and run it. It's now going to create a virtual environment, and then if I see, it still says 0 because now I need to show the hidden files which is there. So yes, same previously I had to show you with A, but trust me, there were nothing. Now we have the .venv. Now what if we go inside this .venv? What we will going to find? Let's see. Inside this we have 3 files called bin, include, lib, py-venv config. So all these things are required for these virtual environment. But next it says that you need to activate. Yes, you have the environment, but you need to activate that environment, or you can say like you need to go inside that room to work something, if you consider environment as a room. Okay, so we just need to say, hey, we are inside this. Now let's go inside the bin, and inside bin you will find a file called activate. So I've cleared the terminal, and we are inside this bin, and what we need to do, we need to say activate, but it says that command not found. So if you are on Mac or Linux, actually you need to say source and then activate. Once you do that, you can see now we have this py flask written here, which is the name of the environment we already have. So now our environment is ready to use, and let's move forward in the documentation. So it says now you need to install the Flask. Now installing Flask is once again easy. We have to use the pip command. So we say pip install Flask, and once we do this, it's actually grabbing the Flask and doing all sorts of things, and very soon we will have Flask installed here inside our virtual environment. So how do we verify that it's really there? So we just need to say pip list of the local packages. So you can see now we have Flask, and remember we said that it's written in the documentation basically that when you install the Flask, all these things are ready to available along with the Flask. So that's how we get all other things you have seen here. That's obviously available inside of the virtual environment, because if I now open a new terminal and then if I say pip list local, you can see we have a lot more other things. We have a fast API written, we have HTTP tool, Pydantic, a lot of different things we have. We don't want that in our virtual environment because we are just using the Flask, and that's how we have. So let's move to the next thing. So let's go to the documentation, and here let's check out at the bottom. Here it says quick start. So once you have the Flask, you can now start writing your web application, and yes, it's that simple. So let's start by writing our first ever route, which is a homepage of hello world. So first of all, what we have to do, we have to open our project in VS Code. So I am on the VS Code, and you know what, VS Code automatically activate your virtual environment if you just open your terminal like this. You can see I just deleted the terminal and recreated it, and it's there. Okay, so that's done. But as we know, we need to create our first ever route. For that, we can once again go on our Flask documentation, and it says that it's going to be easy. First, you need to import the Flask from Flask, and it's very minor difference. So when you're importing something, the name will start from capital F, but the real package name will start from small f. So this is a convention in Python. So that's the important thing. First, import the Flask, create the new app, and then start writing your own route. So for that, we first need to create a file called main.py. You can name it anything, but I given it main. And here I need to say from Flask import Flask with a capital F. That's it for now. Then I need to create app and Flask with the name, and then I need to create my new route. But this is actually going to be a function called let's say index, and this index function will return hello world and nothing else. So that's very easy. And now VS Code is recommending me to install AutoPep 8. So let's do that. It's just recommendation for having a better indentation and styling in VS Code. That's good. But how we can run our application? Yes, we know that we have not yet implemented the route. It's just a simple Python function. But I want to know like what happened if I'm not giving that. So for that, you just need to run the Flask. If you run the Flask and it says that you need to use the Flask app option, and then you need to define like your file, where is your file, and then say run. It's also given on your documentation. So here you can see it says Flask app, the file name you create, and then run. So what we do, we say Flask -app, then our file name is main, and I say run. If I do this, it says that this is a development server, do not use it in production. We can use the WSGI. Okay, that's good. But let's open this localhost 5000. Now, once I open the 5000, it says there is no route. Why? Because Flask doesn't know which function to run as we go on the home page. Here comes our @app.route, and now this annotation actually going to define that what we are going to do when we go on the home page. So now if I go reload the page, it's still not doing that. Maybe I need to restart my server. And yes, you can see now we have the hello world written here. You can also return a full-fledged HTML. So if I say h1 like this, and remember to restart your server, and you can see it's now rendered as the HTML. Isn't it really cool? Now let's understand what actually happened here, all of these things, what we are doing here. So first of all, we need to understand that we are using the main.py, and I told you you can use any name. So what if I say abc.py? Can I run my application with abc? Now it says, hey, you're writing something which can be overwritten. There will be some abc.py, so maybe I can do the abcd to avoid the clashing. Now if I say Flask -app, and then I say main.run, it's not running because there is no main, but we have abcd, and you can see abcd is working absolutely fine. So this means the name doesn't matter, but what matter is how we write. So every time we run our server, we need to provide the name of the entry file, which is our abcd.py in right now. So what if I change it to app.py? Now when I use app.py, I can say app.py, running dates, great. But there is shortcut. When you use app.py or WSGI, anyone, then you don't have to specify -app name of the file. So this means I can just say Flask run. That's it. Once I say Flask run, since we have used the name as app.py, it automatically run this thing. But what if I change it to my app? Now this is not going to run. It says that, hey, you can't use that. Or you can use wsgi.py. So Flask run is still going to work in this case. So that's just about how you can use different things. But when I run this, you can see it says debug is off. Now what is debug is off? Suppose I said that, hey, here I am doing something wrong, so maybe I'm not returning anything. What's going to happen? Is this going to give me any error? So you can see it says internal server error. It's not clear because debug is off. I need to make sure that debug is on. So I say debug is going to be true. Is this the way? We just need to say debug. Now in this case, you can see it says that debug mode is on, and when I go on my browser, reload, and you can see we are getting exactly where is the error, what exactly the error trace, everything is there. So we can debug our application. So that's true. So you always need to use the debug option when you are in development. This is very important. Only in the development part. Do not use debug on in the production. You don't want to give people like what your application is doing. Anyways, so we got it. Now let's get back our hello world, restart our application, and let's get into this application and what we have written, what exactly this is doing. To have a better understanding of how our Flask work, first we can see that yes, we are importing the Flask, but at the same time we are creating a new instance or new variable of this Flask. So we are passing the name. Now what this name do? So let's do that with this, and I say name is whatever it is. Now let's run this and see what we are getting. So here it says name is actually WSGI. Is this like what it is? It could be the name of this. What if I change it to app and now try to run? Yes, exactly. So this is actually the name of the file where we should have our routes. So here you can see it says that our route is available inside this app.py. So our application starts from app.py. Here we are using that, and that's why we always provide this name as here. Now what if I'm not providing the name? Now what's going to happen? It says that, hey, that's good, but I don't know where to start, which file is responsible for every other thing. So that's why it's very important to provide the name. Now after this, once you have done with this, you have the app. Now with this decorator, you can use @app.route. Now when you say route, and this is a function where you provide the route path. So what if I create another route of, let's say this will be about. Now the function name could be anything. I say my about route, and I say about page. If I do this, if I run the application and go say /about, you can see it's working. That means whatever you define inside this route function, like here, that will become your URL, and whatever you return will be inside your page. And this totally doesn't matter, but it's always good to have a proper descriptive name of your function, of your routes. That's really important. So I think you got the point that how you can get started with each and everything and creating route. Now let's move to something crazy, something more advanced in Flask. So for that, let's go on this, and now what if I create a URL pattern which should be like user/Sarthak. Now if I do this, I need to grab the name of the user and then show the name here inside our page. This could be the use case of creating a username based routing where you can show the content inside the page according to the username, or you just want to show the name of the user who is visiting. So how you can grab the route parameter? For that, you first need to go and say, hey, I don't want to create the you can say about, I want to create a user, and I say it's a user page. Now what if I run this? It says, hey, user/Sarthak route is not available. But what about /user only? But it still says not found. What happened? I said /user. That's good, and it's written here. So the real problem here is the slash even after the user. If I remove that, you can see we have the user page, but if I add the slash at the end, you can see it's not working. So one very important to do this is always use slash on your route. What is the benefit of using this? Benefit is obviously this is going to work when you say user slash, it's going to work, but it's also going to work when you are not defining user, because in that case it will redirect user to the slash version. So you can see I'm removing, there is no slash at the end. If I hit enter, it's redirected to having slash at the end. Okay, so that's just a simple update on the routing. But after that, I want to grab the name of the user. So for that, you need to use this angle brackets, and inside this angle bracket provide the name you want to give for that parameter. Now I say welcome, and then I need to use the name like that. But how we can use this name inside of the string? So there is one way, like you can say, hey, I want to concatenate. So just use the plus sign here and here also, and now it's done. But then it says that, hey, you want to use a name variable, but I don't know where this name variable is defined. So actually what happened when you use the parameter like inside the angle brackets for your route, then that variable value will be available inside this function automatically. So here, whatever if we define, we get here, and that's how we name it. So now let's go and reload this page. It says not found because there is no route for user, but there is a route for user slash Sarthak. So welcome Sarthak is here. You can provide a simple space and that will also going to work. That's not giving. Maybe I need to restart the server like this, and still not there. So maybe there is a different way. We can use the f string. So I just need to say f string here, and then inside this, instead of doing all that thing, I just say, hey, I need to use the name, and this will work perfectly. So this is how you use the name, but generally we use the ID instead of the name, or maybe not the slug, but maybe the ID. So what about having a blog slash ID of 1? Then you get the ID and then fetch the blog with the ID of 1. How we can do that? Let's create another route, and I'm going to create from scratch so that I can remember the way of doing it. So blog slash, and this time I'm going to use a little different thing, which is int. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove it for now so that I can say, hey, show blog post ID, block number. That's good because of the GitHub Copilot, the artificial intelligence. Cool, everything is good. Now let's go and see what's going to happen. If I run it, yes, I get block number 1. That's really amazing. So we can also make it big by saying it's a h1 tag, and that's good. That's really nice. But now things will become crazy if instead of ID is always going to be numeric, but I say, hey, this is something different. This is not a number, block number and a string. That's not true. That's why we define that, hey, whatever we are going to get from the URL parameter, I need to make sure that will be an integer. If not, give an error. Okay, so now what do you think? Is it going to give error or is going to render it? Obviously it's going to give error, and basically it says that, hey, there is no route which matches blog with some string as the parameter. But if I say some number, I need to remove this w, that's going to work because there is a route which matching this thing. Okay, so I thought you got the point of what is route parameter, how you can use it, and what are the different type of route parameter. If you want to get more into it, yes, documentation is always ready for you, and there are different kind of route parameter. You can force to have it as a string, which is the default one. You can have it the integer, float, you can provide the path, or finally, the real amazing thing is UUID. You can define that it is going to be only UUID and nothing else. Okay, so that's really good. Now let's move to the next big thing in Flask. So till now we have done only the GET request. What about post, put, patch and delete, other HTTP method? Let's see how we can handle those with Flask. So first of all, you can see we have this blog. So I don't want to use this blog route. That's just for learning. And here we have route to get the user with the name. Instead, we can get the user with ID. And if this is the ID, it should be int. But we also need one more route, which will be just for getting the user. Okay, so in that case, I say, hey, this is going to get the user, and in that I return that welcome whatever the user is, or I can say show all users, like that. Now let's try to check if this is working or not. So user slash, you can see this is the URL, hit enter, and it says lookup error, converting in does not exist. Where's the in? So in is here, it should be int, not in, and run it. So now you can see all user is here, and this is for the GET request. Once again, I need to make sure that I should have a route with a method of post. So this is I'm going to create, and I say methods are post. Now this is saying create new user. Now what if I go on here and I still say that, hey, this is user, but now Flask says that you are creating two routes with the same URL. So this is also route user, this is also route user. This is confusing. Now how we can solve this? Now instead of creating two different routes, what we can do, we can define that, hey, this route will going to handle two methods. One is post, one is get. And now I can do a if check. If the request method is post, I say create new user, and else I say return this. So how do we get this request? So this request we can get directly from Flask. So I say, hey Flask, give me the request, and here we go. Now if I go here and reload, it says that all user, because it's a GET request. Now to test out the post request, I'm going to open the Insomnia I have. You can also use Postman. That's also going to work. So once we have the Insomnia, I can go to localhost 5000/user. And now if I hit send, you can see it says create new user, because we are choosing post request. Now if I choose get request, it says all user. So that means Flask can easily handle any kind of request we provide it. This means we can also suggest that, hey, it can also work with delete request. Is it going to work? Let's try to see that if it is going to work or not. So I say delete user, also one more, which is put request. So that's going to be easy like this. GitHub Copilot is helping me, and that's done. So this means if I change it to put method, okay, so for the put is update. Okay, now it should get the update user. Wow, this is great. What about delete? Yes. So now we know how we can handle different you can say methods or HTTP methods within the Flask routing system. So first of all, we can see that all routes are same, just different method. But when we delete or when we do the put, we need to get the ID so that we can either delete or update the user. So we need to cut this out from here, and then we need to create another one, which is app.route for user, and instead of string as a name, I need the ID, and provide the method as get and put. And let's grab this get and put thing from here and then define user with ID and paste it. Okay, so I say else here, and this is just if. So it should be else if, and that's good. Now you can see once again our application is growing and routes are increasing. We need a way to extract all the routes to a different file so that that file will only be responsible for handling the routes. Let's do that. Now, before moving into extracting the routes into new file or dedicated file, we first need to work on creating a package inside our application. So right now our application directly starts from app.py. Now instead of this, I'm going to create a directory called app, or maybe application, whatever you want. I'm going to use the app. And then inside this, I'm going to create a file which is called __init. Now this file is always responsible for running without calling. So it always run when you work with this. Okay, let's run it. Now you can see hello is run or printed here because we are on init. It's a package which automatically run. And one more thing to notice here, it says that fail to start the Flask application in a module app, use app name to specify. So basically, when we are not creating a directory or init file, then this is just a module. But when we create it, it becomes a package. So what I'm going to do, since this hello or init automatically run, I'm going to copy everything from app.py, move this into init.py so that we don't have to specify any file name, and I delete app.py. Now we just have app as the directory name. If I try to run, it's working fine. Cool. So that's really nice. This is how we move into module to package. Now what if I change this name to application, which is the incorrect name? What's going to happen? You can see now it says that, hey, you need to define, just like we did with the file name, that's the same. So I can use the app once again and get back. Great. Everything is good. Now how we extract the routes into dedicated file? For that, we can go to a new concept in Flask, which is called blueprint. If you scroll down here, we got the blueprint. Blueprint is a way to organize a group of related views or other code. Basically, we can get the code and extract it in a dedicated file. So just like this is a package, you create auth.py, which has all the authenticated related information. How do we get it? First of all, we need to import the blueprint, create a new instance of this blueprint, and register this blueprint. Now this blueprint will give you this BP as the new instance of this blueprint, and then whenever you create a route, instead of app.route, use the BP. Let's do this. So inside this app, I'm going to create a new file called blueprints.py. Now inside this, I'm going to move every route we have till here. Now this file needs two things. One is app, one is request. So first of all, from Flask, import blueprint and request. Now to change this app to something else, we can create a new instance of blueprint. So let's call it app now, but we are using the app as the name of this blueprint, and that's good. Now instead of this app, you can say BP, you can use route, whatever you want. That's good. But the most important thing is we need to register this blueprint into our application. How do we do that? First say app.register blueprint, and then we need to import the blueprint. Now this app is actually a package. So inside this app, we can import the blueprints. So we need to say from app import blueprint, and now from blueprint I have the blueprint name, which is app. So see, this is the name of the blueprint we have here. Okay, so that's good. Now this is done, and We just need to run it and reload. You can see all routes are still working fine. Now we can go one step ahead. Instead of getting everything inside this blueprint file, let's create a directory called blueprints. Now inside of this, you can see we have two different kinds of route. One route is a normal home route, other is user route or user blueprint, I can call it. So I'm going to create a user.py blueprint. This blueprint will only going to get the user related blueprint, and it need to be like this, but this time we are going to call it as the user, not app. So this will become user. Okay, that's good. Next, we should also call it like blueprint dot home or maybe app. That could be the case. Or if we are creating a website, then we can call it web. Python want to make changes to the file. That's good. Okay, so this will become web and we call it web like this. Okay, so now we have two different blueprints, so we need to register two different blueprints. So first of all, we say from app.blueprints import web and user. Okay, so we say, hey, web.app, so web.web, and then user.user. Let's see if this is going to work or not. No, there's some issue with this. It says there's no object route inside this. So the problem here is basically of this function name. So we are creating the function with the same name, which is the blueprint name. So instead of calling it user, if I call it users, you can see everything is working absolutely fine. But we don't want to do that. Instead, we change the name of the blueprint and make sure it is BP here, and everywhere when we are using it, we can call it BP. Now, when you are giving the name to the blueprint, make sure it is different with other blueprints you are creating. So this variable name could be same, but the blueprint name which we are giving here, web, it should be very unique. So instead of web.web, I say web.bp because it's a variable name. And that's good. We are done with this and everything is working fine. But remember, I told you we cannot use the same name. So what if I use web here also? So if I do that, it says a name web is already registered with a different blueprint. Okay, so you got the point, like how we can name it, name the blueprint and use these blueprint. Okay, so that's really nice. We have very clean structure of our application, of our Flask application. We have dedicated file for the user related information or the routing or views. Let's work on something different cool in Flask. Now work on the templates. So you can see we can have every HTML thing in a HTML dedicated file. Once again, if you go on the user blueprint here, we can see we are returning this all user in HTML as a string. So instead of this, how about when I go into /user, it should return me user.html like this. If I do this, this should be not good enough for us, because in that case Flask will actually give user.html. Now instead of this, we need to move into rendering HTML. How we can do that? So we need to import this render template function from Flask and then provide the name of the file, and that's it. Name should be name, whatever variable we want to pass. That's a simple thing. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, render template. We need to import this. So from Flask, render template should be there. Okay, now we need to provide the user.html, and if I now go and run it, it says template not found. I cannot find any template you are defining, which is template means the HTML file. Okay, so let's create a user.html file, and inside that I create h1 tag all users, and let's see. Now it says, hey, I still can't find any template. So where should the template live? So it says that it should live inside the templates directory of your project. So now we need to create a templates directory inside my app package, and then move this into templates, and that's going to work fine. Cool. So this is very easy. Now let's do one thing. Instead of calling it user.html, because later on we should have user create, user edit, lot of things. So I'm going to create another directory called user, and then put user.html inside it. And now I'm going to call it user dot or user show all, or maybe index, anything you like. Now here you need to say user slash index.html. Is this going to work? Okay, yeah, it's working. All users are still here. That's really nice. But what about the user with the ID of 1? Right now we are just saying welcome 1, which is at the bottom, welcome 1. How we can move it to the HTML file or template? So render template, it should be user slash show.html, and then we need to pass the ID we are passing like this. So let's create a template, and this we call show.html, and then h1 will be showing user with ID, and this time we are going to use double curly braces because this is a Jinja 2 template engine. Now what is template engine? Template engine basically help you to write something which is in a Python, but at the end it will rendered as the HTML. So template designer documentation. So this is Jinja 2, you can read it. We can use for loop, a lot of things we are going to use it. That's really simple. So if everything is fine, it should show us showing user with the ID 1. Wow, that's really nice. But at the end, what we want to create a user, then show it, then show all the user, edit the user. How we can create it? So let's create a form to have all the things needed to create a user, like username, email, and let's say phone number, whatever we have. Then we submit it to Flask and then store it into the database. So let's first go to the blueprint of user, and here we have a route called user which is going to create the user, but we need a route which can show us the form to create the user. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's create one more route and we call it, once again it's going to be the same but little different, and the difference is user slash create. Okay, I'm going to call this, and this is going to be just a get request, but it's okay if we are not providing any method. It will be get, and we call it create, and this is going to work because this name and this name is different and the URL is also different. Now it says that you need to have user dot create the template name. So let's go and create user create.html, and here I create a markup and I say user create, and then inside this, first of all, I need a form. This form is going to have an input field for a name. So name is name, and then I also need one for email, and what else? So name, email, I think for now this is okay. Then finally we need an input button, which is actually going to the submit button. So type is actually going to be submit. Type is going to be, maybe we can use the button with the type of submit. Okay, and we call it create. That's great. Now when we send this, or when we click on this create button, it should submit the form. But let's first see how it looks. So user/create, and yeah, we have it. We can provide some placeholders, and placeholders, enter your name, enter your email. Looks good. Next we need to click on this and it should submit. Right now it's submitting on the same page because we don't have any information how it's going to submit. First of all, we define that method is going to be the post method. In that case, it will going to submit on the action part, or the route we define in the action of this form. So route is going to be user slash, that's it, because we have this user slash. This is going to create the user when we are going to do this. So ideally what's going to happen when we submit the form from here, it should go on this route. It will find that this is going to be a post request and it should return the create new user. Okay, that's good. Let's now move and click on create, and wow, this is really good. It says that create new user. We done it. What next? Create new user is good, but we actually want to get information of what are the things we are writing here. So basically, if I say Sarthak and Sarthak email comes here, and then if I click on create, it should give me the username and the email. Nice. So how do we handle this? So basically we have this request. What if we just return the full request here? Let's see what's going to happen. So if I reload, it's having some internal server error because we cannot return full thing. And here we can say, give me the form. So is this going to work? Yes, form is giving you the fields. So once again, Sarthak email, and yes, we get both of these, the email and the name. Wow, that's great. So if we have the email, if we have the name, then we can simply register user. So consider that we have already registered. We will do the database part later, but suppose that we have created the user in the database. Then we need to redirect user to the same page, the create route, once it is done. For that, what we are going to do, we will say return redirect, and we are going to use a new function called URL for, and we need to import this redirect from this, and also we need to import the URL for. Now what this URL for will do, when you define some URL for, it will actually find the route related to the text you write here. Okay, so just for now, I just want to see what I will get if I return this on the create form. So reload, it says, did you mean web.index? So now it's not able to find it. So user.create, what if I do this? Now I get user create. So how this works? So I said, go to the user blueprint and find a function called create and give me the route for it. So this is a function, and when I said URL for this thing, I get user create. Wow, that means I can also see user.user. So if I say user.user, I should get this, right? Let's see. Wow, that's really nice. Superb. So this is how our URL for works. So where we want to redirect user to the create part. Okay. So here we need to store user in DB and then redirect to the same page. Now let's go. Click and you can see it's redirect back to the same page. Now what we need to do, we need to connect the database. We can use the raw database connection system in our Flask application, which is given here. If you can go, database is here. But instead of using this, we can use the Flask Sqlalchemy. So this is the one which is flask-sqlalchemy.palette project. So first of all, we can go on the quick start and we can see that it's very easy. We just need to say pip install u Flask Alchemy. So let's do that and it's done. And after that, we need to configure it. So first of all, let's import it from our Flask Alchemy. So here we go. Then we need to create the extension, which is like this. And then we have already created the app. We need to just configure it and initialize the DB. So here we are. So configuration. Okay, so this will come here. And now here we say the project.db is the SQLite database. If you want to use MySQL or Postgres, you are free to use it. And every information will be available inside this Sqlalchemy documentation. Okay, so that's done. Now, configuration is finalized. So now let's clean up things and you can see everything is working fine. And we need to create this file. And this file, I believe, should be available inside of this app. So project.db we have created and we will see later what we will going to do. After this, we need to create the model. Model is actually the definition of your database structure, how your database will look like. So we need to create a class, and for now, yes, we are going to create the class inside of this underscore init and see how this is working. So first of all, we need the DB. That's why we have used this code inside of this init. And once we have it, we create a class called user and we pass out the db.model, which defining this as the alchemy model. Okay, now we need to have this id field, which is a column, it's an integer and it's a primary key. And then we need the username. Instead of username, I will take it just the name. And this is a string. It's unique. I don't want this to be unique. Instead, I want this email to be unique and like this. Okay. And it's going to be label false and also for email. So this is very simple user model we have defined. So once you have the model, it says that the table name user will automatically assign to the models table. So when we use this model to create the table, it will automatically create the table for you. But now to have the tables in our database, we first need to run this db.createAll. But we will run this when we have in context. So we need to run this code below this line. But I want to show you one thing that you can see here. My code is there and I have a new directory called instance and which is empty right now. So what if I just write it down, and as soon as I write this db.createAll, you can see a new database is created inside the instance. This is really cool. Okay. So once we have this, we can play around with this. So instead of playing from the front end or from the UI, I can show you one amazing tool with Flask called Flask Shell. This Flask Shell is really amazing to interact with your application. So from here, first of all, what we have to do, we have to import from app import db and user. So this is the app package we have, and from there I'm importing this this db and the user model. So we have this. Now what we can do, we have this user model. So with this user model we can create new user. So I say new underscore user is equal to user model, where I provide name as Sarthak and we provide email as sarthak@bitfumes.com. Now if I hit enter, nothing happened, but if I say user new user, you can see there is a transit. So what next we can do, I'm going to clear it, and then I say new user dot name, which is here, but this is just the new instance of the user model. We need to make sure that we have this user model and we need to put all these user information into the database. So we need to say db.session.add and adding new user. That's good. And then db.session.commit. So once we have added that, we need to say that okay, everything is now added, let's put all these things into the real database, which is commit. And once I did the commit, I can now print new user, new underscore user, and you can see we have user with 1. This means if I now say new user.id, I am getting 1. That's really great. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kill this terminal and once again get into the Flask Shell, and then from app, once again I'm importing db. So db.query not db.query, I think I need to import user. So I say user.query.all, and if I do this, I get 1 result, which is the 1 user we have just now created. So since we have the user, why not show that user in the list of our HTML? That means when I go on /user, all user should give me the list of all the users. Let's do that. For this, we need the DB, we need the user model. Okay, so for that, we can go to our user blueprint. Inside this, we have this user with the get. On the get part, I want to first query for the user. Users is equal to user model I need from our app. So from app, import user model. That's good. So user.query.all, and with this I will going to pass users as users. That's great. Now since we have the users, we can go in our template and here we can show that all users here. But how we will loop through it? Here comes the Jinja 2 templating system, which is we can go and template, rendering the template. Here we go, and here we have the Jinja 2. Cool, let's do this. So here it's really important to notice that we are using a very nice syntax called curly braces and this %sign. So we start with for keyword and end the loop with end for. So this is just the block of the for loop, and then we use the array, or in Python you can call it tuple. So we just need to loop it. Okay, so let's do this, and here we have the index. Now we use the UL and then we pass out this kind of syntax to loop through our user. Now this is going to be user.name, and that's it. So this is how it's going to work, but you can see our server is not running. Why? Because of the problem we are having importing the user model in our user blueprint. So you can see we are importing the user model here from app. Now app is actually this init. We are defining our model here. This is not good. We need to refactor it just like we refactored our routes into blueprints. We need to refactor all the Sqlalchemy thing into its dedicated directory and files. Let's now do this and then we will move to the Jinja part. So let's first remove every file from here and then start with a file called extensions. So extensions.py. Now inside this, I'm going to initialize our Sqlalchemy. So remember in our init, the app, we are initializing this Sqlalchemy as DB. So let's copy this or cut actually and move it here. That's it. This is all we need from this extension.py. Okay, so let's now go inside this app and it need the DB to initialize the database. So how do we do that? So first of all, we need to say from app.extensions import DB. That's it. So it is so easy. Now everything is working fine. And still we are not able to fix the error. So next important thing in the refactoring of Sqlalchemy is create a directory called models. Inside this, since we are having a user model, let's create a file called user.py. Now let's move this user class into the user.py. And as we know, it needs the DB and we know how to get this DB from the extension file. So from app.extensions import DB, and that's it. This is the only thing we need to do in the refactoring part. In that case, the problem is inside our user.py blueprint. So let's open the blueprint for the user. And here we are importing the user model from the app, which is not true because now we can say app.models import user. Okay, so instead of this, I can say app.models.user import user as user model. And now here I use user model.query.all. Okay, now it says that it should be in small u because the file name is small. So I renamed the import as user model to have a better understanding what exactly this is doing. So since everything is now refactored, let's try to run the server, and it's running. Since this server is running and we have already added the for loop for our users, let's now go and see if this is working. Wow, you can see we have the user. That's really nice. This is how we refactor for bigger applications. So we can see we have the user list, but what if we go and try to create new user? So yes, we can go here, we can type the name and we can type anything in the email, but it says it should be the proper email. Create it. It's not redirecting me to the all user page. Let's first fix this. So for that, we can go to the user blueprint, the user route, and here we have the post section. So instead of redirecting to the same page, I say redirect to the user.user. And remember, when I say URL for user.user, it will get me this URL. And since it's redirect, that means it's a GET request. So it will go here. Okay, so let's try once again, fixing it at gmail.com. And yes, you can see I'm redirected to this list of the user page. But how we actually implement the create user or store user? First of all, I don't like to have everything inside a single function, like with the post, with the guest, get, everything. So let's extract this post section into a new function so that we can easily define which is the post user and which is a guest user. So I say app.route, this looking like we are doing exactly same, but this time we define that this is going to be only for the post. So define, and this I call store. Why I'm calling store? Because we are storing the user. So here we store the user, and in that case we can just remove it and we call it index. So this will match with the file name of the template we are using. So see, template, when we show all the user, we call it index.html, and same name I'm using here in the function. It's really good to have the same name so that you don't have to think twice. Okay, that's good. So we got this, and now let's remove this method section. So by default it will be just for get. Now instead of user.user, it's really clear that I need to redirect user to user.index. This is much clearer. Okay, so that's good. Now it says app is not defined. Okay, so this is a BP, actually blueprint, not the app. Cool, everything is done. So how do we store the user? It's going to be super easy. First of all, we know we can get the details of username and email through the request. Now I need to first get the user model. So first of all, I need to get the user model, which we already have. Okay, so let's close it. Now I say new user is equal to user model, and in this user model I say name is coming from request form name and email is coming from request form email. Next, since it's just a user, how about saying new user save? Let's try it and see if this is going to work or not. So I say bitfumes at gmail.com. Now it says, hey, there's no save attribute. So this time GitHub Copilot is wrong. What we have to do, we need to say db.session.add and then db.commit. Now we need to import the db also. So I say from app.extension import db. Okay, everything is nice. Let's try once again. So reload, and you can see we have the new user. Wow, this is really cool to see how we can progress. Okay, so we have created the user, we can show the user. But what if we want to remove the user? Let's implement the delete part of the user. To delete a user, we first need to have a delete button here. So let's go on our index.html, and here for every li we have, we can say we need to put this in a p tag, and then we need a button called delete. Okay, so let's see how this looks. There's a button called delete, but I can give a style and say display flex like this, and I may use div to have this button inside of that, so it looks better than before. Okay, now what we need next, we need to just click on this, and then it should remove the user from our list. So first of all, we need to have a form which will send a delete request. How do we send a delete request? First of all, let's create a form. Inside this, we just have a button called delete, and the type of button is submit. This is going to submit this. And here method, how do we add the delete method? We will see that, but right now I can say this is going to be /user/ the ID of the user, and we know that we have this user ID also in our user collections like this. So that's great. So we know how to add the ID. We can use double curly braces user.id. So now if I go and reload and inspect this element, we can see that route or action is user/1. But you know, we can do one more thing, is adding the method. How do we add the delete method here? So what if we add a delete method directly here inside it? So what's going to happen if I hit on delete? It's actually redirecting me to the get of user1, which is showing user with ID 1, showing with the ID 2. It's not actually treating this as a delete method. So if this is not working, what we can try is having a post and add a hidden field called underscore method and provide the actual method. Let's try this. So hit on delete and it says method not allowed. This seems really interesting. How we can solve this? To solve this issue, we will going to use the JavaScript now. So let's call this form as with a class of delete form, and then I'm going to remove this input field, and then here I can create a script tag for my JavaScript, and I say document.add event listener of click to everything, but this should be with the arrow function, but only where if e.target.classList.contains delete form as the class. If this is the case, then say e.prevent default, that means not submitting the form, and I say something which should be there. So you can see it's still not catching it, and this is happening because we need to use the submit event of the form, not the click event of the form. So now you can see it's preventing of this action. That's great. So now is the time we can actually submit it, but we need the ID. So how we can get the ID for it? We can provide ID like this. So user.id will be here, and we don't need even the action. So we can get the ID. So ID is equal to const ID. This is JavaScript, not the Python. So e.target.id, and I can alert with the ID and see if it is working. So it should say 1, it should say 2. That's great. Next is we need to say fetch, and in this fetch we say user ID method is going to be delete, and then redirect me to the same this page, and that's good. That's good. Okay, so let's do that. Click send. It's redirecting to the same page. That's why it's there. What if I just say alert, and now I need to close this and click, and you can see it's done. That's why it's having delete. Now what we need to do, we just need to implement the real delete in our user route. So here we are delete, and here we can just print and see that we should get delete or not. And in the return, this is kind of an API thing. We just say deleted. Okay, so now clear everything, click on delete, and you can see delete is there. That means we are getting the user. So now we have the ID which we are getting, so we can actually check if we really getting ID or not. So delete, so it should say 1 and 2. Cool, this is working. And now we just need to say, hey, get the user, and then user delete the session and commit it, and finally say deleted. Okay, that's great. So let's try it one more time and see if it is deleting or not. Click on delete, and you can see it's now deleted. That's really nice. And now we don't have any user. Cool. So this is how we delete a user using JavaScript inside of the Flask. That's good. Now what next? We can also work on edit and update it, but I will keep this for you as a homework so that you can actually build something on your own, not just watching all the tutorial every time. The last thing I want to do is having some styling here and refactor our HTML to use the you can say include part of templating system, which will help us to organize our template. So first of all, I'm going to use the Tailwind CSS in our application to have a very nice look. So get it started, and I just want the CDN for this. So play with the CDN, and here we got it. We can just use this source file in our HTML. So we can see we have this index where we don't have the proper HTML. Show, we don't have create. Now in the create we have the proper HTML. So what if we just say, hey, this is the Tailwind CSS we want. This comes inside of our create. So when I go on the user create, you can see now it is reformed. Okay. So first of all, for this form, I need a border and rounded medium and a shadow of medium. And let's see how this looks. Reload, and it is looking better, I can say, and having padding of 5. That's cool. And now for these two input fields, I say, hey, this also need a border, rounded medium, no shadow, padding of let's say 2, and that's it, I think. Cool, looking good. And similar kind of class I want to provide to the create, and only once. Let's try this. Okay, that's good. But since this is a button, it should have a hover. So when I hover over it, the background will become gray 400. Let's see. Okay, so when I say gray 600, then I say on the hover, text will become white. Okay, yeah, looking good. Okay, that's great. Next is we need to have this as a form at the center. So first here I say div, and inside div I push all this form inside it, and then I'll say maximum width will be 2xl, and it's not working. So maybe I can have a main section which actually provide a container, or maybe I don't know if there is a container still on the Tailwind CSS. No, I think there is not. So maybe I can give the margin of 10 all over the places like this. So we have the margin from everywhere, and then with this margin we can provide that, hey, this width of this form is going to be 1/2, so just half of the page, and I need this to be at the center. So first of all, I create another div which will contain everything, but at this point I need to say, hey, this is a flex and margin auto, and this is not going to be margin auto, will go here. Yes, it is now at the center. And let's add one title, and I say create user and call it text 2xl. Great. And having margin bottom 4. Now that's really nice. So we have added the Tailwind CSS, but you know what, I also want a nav bar. So inside this, or above this actually, I say nav bar, and the nav bar will be having home page. So I will say an anchor tag which will land me to the home page, then create new user. So I say /user/create user, and all user will go like this. Okay, great. Now I need this to be styled. So navbar will be having padding y of 2 and padding x of 4, background of let's say gray 800, and then text is going to be white. Looks good. So maybe I can put it 4 and 6. Nice. Okay, then all these anchor tag will have some class, and it will be text of large, and then they all need to have margin X of 2. Maybe I can put it 4 to have a better clarity. Yes, that's great. So this is how we create a navbar. So if I click on create user, that's where we are. What if I click on all user? Hey, what happened? I have created all these stylings and new amazing things. What happened to these? Basically, we have only this styling in the create.html, but we want to have this everywhere. We want nav to be on every page. How we can do that? We don't want to repeat ourselves. Here comes our Jinja. So we are going to use the Jinja to have that amazing feature. So here what we are going to do, we need to search for include, because we need to find how we can include a file in every other HTML or you can say template. So here we have the extend section, which is going to make the inheritance in our application. So this should be the base of our you can say app, or base.html you can call it. So here inside this template I create base.html, and inside this I'm going to paste everything which have here. But now we want something like this we have. So we need the title and the tailwind CSS, which is important for us. So title will be like this. We can add the title also. And then we also need the navbar to be here. So copy that navbar, paste it here. And just like that, we also need this main and div, so that we can close the div and close the main also. In that case, we don't need these things, but we need them as a reference. So here comes the div and like this. Okay, now you can see we have here footer. We don't need the footer, and we need the content. Now content will be inside this. So let's remove these two, and this will be margin auto things. All these things actually comes here. It should replace at this point. We don't need ID, we just need like this. Cool. So what is going to happen here now, on every class or every template we want, we can use it directly. So if I go and see, it just have without styling, but we can extend it. So every class or every HTML will use this extend of the base HTML. So here if I say, hey, I just want first to extend it, then on the context part, on the context block, use like this. So finally close the block, and now if I go, see, everything is back. Wow, that's really great. So we can use same thing in our index also. So let's do that, and block, and similar to this we have the show. So do that, and cool. Now if I go on the home is still not there. So we should, we don't have any home related HTML. So we have all user, we have create user, and we have to create a like show single user. So when we have a new user, we can do that. So let's create a new user, Sarthak at bitfunes.com. Click on create, it's redirected, and here we are. So if we can make this as a link, then this will be good. So we have this show, and we say we have this list of all the user, and then we can call this as border and once again rounded MD and shadow MD. That's good. And this should be how it is looking. Okay, that's not the good case. First of all, I need everything to be at the center. So class margin auto, and let's have it. Okay, this is now at the center, and all user will become like text to Excel. That's great. And now we need to have this as a width of 1/2. That's great. And padding of 4. That's also nice. And that's about, I think I need to use a, instead of UL, make it a div. Okay, so we made it as a div, so let's convert this as a div. Great. Okay, so it should be having width of full. Okay, so with 1/2, if I do that and remove the width from inner div, now it's looking good. Okay, so we have this user 1, and let's make this as margin right of 4, and this is a button, so maybe I can call this as a danger button. So background red 500, text white, and rounded MD, yeah, all of these other things. That's good, we made it right. And then instead of providing style like this, we can say flex and justify between, and yeah, that's good. So now if I go on create user, create another joe@gmail.com. Yes, it is there, but finally we need margin Y of 4. Looks really nice. Now next is, I just want to click on this user and land on to the page. That means it should not be a list, it should be an anchor tag, and then we say href is going to be for the route of slash user/user.id. and now if I click here, you can see I am here on the new page. Just like we are doing for every other page, we can do the same thing here and showing with the user ID 1. That's great. So this is just to show you how you can use the Tailwind to style things and have all that. Great. That's how you inherit the base HTML into your files. You can do that for every other file you want. If you want, you can also create a navbar, dedicated nav file, nav.html, and include that nav here in this base.html. So you can see we can have the block, we can add the title, we can do a lot of amazing thing with this, you can say with this Jinja HTML thing. So that's all about pretty much thing about the Flask. I hope you liked this video, and if you have liked this, please go and subscribe to this Bitfumes YouTube channel, because here you get ton of variety of amazing things you can learn to enhance your knowledge and get a better job and make your life better. So we will meet in the next video, amazing video. Till then, don't forget to subscribe Bitfumes and follow Bitfumes on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Till then, goodbye.